Late summer on a beach in Holland. Louise Arbour says goodbye to the salty North Sea. She's returning home to Canada.
She is open, creative. She has a mind like a steel trap.
For 3 years, she's been probing the darkest side of humanity.
She's bullied heads of state, things, and she's, gotten right down on her knees and dug for evidence.
I would describe her as a person with a very open mind and someone who is deliciously unpredictable.
The drive for justice is sort of what keeps her going. I mean, you can't just curl up and cry.
It's a lot about telling the truth, about exposing what happened, so that it's not just, it doesn't go down in history as an allegation, a legend, a claim.
She's put crimes against humanity on the global agenda. Kosovo. The war is over. Kosovar Albanians are returning, but afraid. Louise Arbour is Chief Prosecutor of the United Nations War Crimes Tribunal. She's here to focus the world's attention on the slaughter of innocent civilians. She's headline material.
I don't know if you want to go in the autopsy suite or not.
I think that this gives you some idea of the nature of the operation, right? There's fast decay of the body substances.
Forensic teams from 60 countries have converged on Kosovo.
This is the blowout in that direction.
Arbour has 700 people collecting evidence.
Consistent with a gunshot wound to back of head, execution style.
The name of this poor gentleman is Enver Mercelli, 50 years.
The crime in Kosovo is enormous. The killers feel untouchable. Arbour is determined to change that, to break the cycle of impunity. Every few steps, there's another story. From Kosovo to Cambodia, in wars today, 9 out of 10 victims are civilians. Rules of war don't count anymore. Grief breeds hatred. Vengeance is a way of life. International justice seems distant when the enemy lives next door. Arbour has to fight her own emotions.
I think it's going to take some distance to really just appreciate the human impact of it, because I'm sure that 3/4 of the time I was there, I was trying to assess in a more clinical fashion, what have we got here? When, how many, were they like? The evidence, essentially, is what you're always attuned to first. But when you see it in the context of the people who are living with what's there, and for them it's not just the case, then it's a little more difficult to maintain that comfortable clinical distance.
Daughter-in-law, her nephews, she all lost them in this house. They're all killed. We gathered 19 of them in that house, shot 13 of them. 4 were wounded. And I lost 5 members of my family.
Mais c'était dur. Il y a des moments qu'elle a passé que j'ai vu que vraiment, je dirais qu'elle était peut-être un petit peu découragée. Mais le lendemain matin, elle se levait, puis là, elle recommençait. Elle est vraiment entêtée à faire son travail, puis à bien le faire. Puis ça, elle commence pas quelque chose qu'elle finit pas.
Louise and André were close to their mother, Rose. Their father wasn't always there. They moved around the Montreal area.
When we moved from Sainte-Geneviève to La Colle, it was like the middle of the field. There was nothing around. We didn't have any friend around. So for a few years, we really were together all the time. The four of us, the five including the dog. And I keep really good memories of this period. And then we went into boarding school. And then the fun stopped all of a sudden. Well, that's it. So Louise enjoyed it a lot, and I didn't. And every Sunday night, Mom was making chicken wings and spare ribs with fried rice, and it was the routine every week. And we'd go after, I don't know, 8 o'clock or so, we'd go to the boarding school. Louise smiling and me crying.
Louise spent her school years under the nuns at the Regina Assumpta College.
It was a very authoritarian. I think intellectual rigor dominated the teaching, maybe also because it appealed to my own lack of other talents, such as artistic or intuitive talents, which I don't have very much of.
Her father left the family when Louise was 12. Rose moved to town and opened a women's clothing store. When money was tight, Louise became a day student. She loved school.
Elle était bien aimée au collège aussi, hein? Parce que même quand elle a fini, elle était présidente du collège, que c'était les élèves qui faisaient les lections puis qui l'avaient élue comme présidente du collège. Moi, j'avais été bien surprise à ce moment-là parce que je savais qu'elle était assez populaire, mais je pensais jamais qu'elle pourrait... Parce qu'il y avait des élèves que les parents étaient beaucoup mieux nantis que moi, hein? Les filles de médecins, d'avocats et ça. Et puis moi, c'était pas ça. J'avais ma petite boutique et puis... alors, les élèves l'aimaient beaucoup.
Marie-Josée Sen became her friend for life.
Ça fait 42 ans que je la connais. Quand on se rencontre, on parle de la même façon. Elle n'a pas changé son langage parce qu'elle est plus connue maintenant. Elle n'a pas rien changé. On aime les mêmes choses encore. On rit de la même façon. On a encore nos éclats de rire comme avant. C'est dans ce sens-là qu'elle n'a pas changé. Elle n'est pas devenue une dame ou quelqu'un à qui on ne peut pas parler parce qu'elle a un haut poste ou qu'elle occupe des fonctions importantes.
The nuns taught discipline, hard work. It was the mid-1960s, the end of an era in Quebec. Louise and her classmates were ready to change.
It was an environment in which promoted a lot of virtues that I've subsequently questioned, such as obedience, deference.
I do sometimes wonder if there's a slightly rebellious streak in Louise Arbour. And I think there's certainly a readiness in her to challenge what appears to be the status quo.
I'm perfectly certain that Mr. Milosevic thought that he could keep me out of Kosovo. Well, I believe that he can't keep himself out of The Hague. We'll just see.
Straightforward. Yeah, shall I lead on? Right, ladies and gentlemen, that's your lot. Please stop there.
And she certainly doesn't like to be told this is not possible or you can't do this.
And I think the other message I want to put out right there at the beginning is also the authority of the tribunal. Chapter 7 and linked to Ratchak, we got here, right? We had a right to be here, and there we are. So chapter
Kosovo
7,
became a priority for Arbour's team back in January. It began at a village called Ratchak. Arbour was at home in The Hague one early Saturday morning when she received a phone call from Bill Walker, the chief foreign observer in Kosovo. He was shaken. Serb soldiers had murdered more than 40 Kosovar Albanians. Arbour was watching BBC.
Pendant que je l'avais au téléphone, je lui ai dit, Louis, je le vois ce qui s'est passé. Il m'a dit, mais c'est pire encore. Et là, je lui ai dit tout de suite, je vais venir.
The Yugoslav government had refused her a visa 20 times.
J'ai informé les autorités yougoslaves que j'y allais et que visa ou pas de visa, que je serais à la frontière lundi matin.
Miss Arbour went to the border point check without a visa, and she was denied an access.
This time, too, she was turned back, humiliated.
At that time, I thought it was the lowest point in everything I had tried to do at the tribunal. It felt just like a total failure. There was literally nobody behind us. I mean, to me, that was the feeling that, except the cameras, of course, and I had underestimated what that would mean.
Today, Louise Arbour, the Canadian judge who's investigating war crimes in the Balkans, tried to reach the scene of the crime. Our chief political correspondent...
Because when I came back to The Hague that I realized that it didn't feel that way. Certainly inside the tribunal, it felt like a high point, that we had sort of put our issue to world public opinion in a very, in a sense, telling, very dramatic fashion.
After Račak, Serbian troops stepped up their ethnic violence. NATO got ready for war. Arbour's team went into crisis mode to trace responsibility for the attacks up the Serb chain of command.
In Kosovo, we still needed to get, pretty quickly, investigators out, speaking to witnesses and building up our picture of what we refer to as the crime base, what really had happened, what offences had been committed on the ground.
Arbour's staff worked amidst mayhem.
You want me to follow up?
They determined that the orders came from the top, from Slobodan Milosevic and his closest associates. But politicians worried that indicting Milosevic for crimes against humanity would paint him into a corner.
We were confronted constantly with the idea that the justice process, our process, was an impediment to peace. It was an irritant, that we had to hold back the justice process because it could derail the peace process, which to me is completely absurd. On May 22nd, I presented an indictment for confirmation against Slobodan Milosevic and 4 others.
Arbour is a prosecutor, not a politician. Her passion, criminal law. Her mandate, bringing war criminals to justice.
Nobody is safe when leaders who have the capacity to do massive damage to their own populations are guaranteed impunity, essentially. To tackle this kind of abuse of power through a criminal sanction is, in a sense, I think, the ultimate achievement of criminal law. That's what it has to contribute to democracy.
The Supreme Court of Canada was like Mecca to the young law clerk who arrived there in 1971. Louise Arbour was 24, a law graduate from the University of Montreal. She barely spoke English. It was a true adventure. She fell in love with another law clerk and moved to Toronto.
Je trouvais ça loin, mais je me disais, c'est sa décision, c'est sa vie. Hein? Elle était avec Larry, qu'elle aimait beaucoup, alors je me suis dit, ça va être sa vie. Je le savais, moi, que pour moi, c'était loin, puis je la perdais. Hein? Une fille, pour moi, c'était une grosse chose.
Arbour and Larry Tamman had 3 children. She raised a family and taught law at Osgoode Hall.
People always used to joke about how our family was such the lawyer's family. It's like everything is discussed and talked about, and there's nothing's ever irrational or unfair.
She wanted us to be able to make decisions on our own and to think rationally and clearly about everything, and my mother was very able to let go of her attachment to her kids and allow us to develop on our own.
She was 39 when she was appointed judge at the Superior Court of Ontario.
Regardless of the law.
So if you combine the fact that although she'd been teaching for a short period of time, she had a terrific reputation already. She was a francophone and a woman. She had a lot going for her on the professional side and sociologically, and she was just a very logical person.
She had loved teaching criminal law. Now she was running trials.
It was wonderful work. I really liked it. A murder case with a jury is probably the hardest thing that you could do as a jurist. You are, as one single person, the producer, the director, the main character, you're doing all that. Many, many things can go wrong. It's public, of course. From the moment you get up in the morning, everything you do, all the work you do in public. So it's very intense.
Then she was promoted to the Court of Appeals. One of her cases concerned Imre Finta. The ruling ended Canada's effort to deport Nazi war criminals. Another ruling strengthened the defense for people charged with rape. Critics lashed out at the judge.
And judges in this country are sexist.
Those who categorized her as a conservative, I just think are dead wrong. She does approach her work with an open mind, and I think that's her reputation.
There's no protection for women.
For Arbour, criminal law is there to protect the rights of individuals.
It's a field of law that's very suspicious of abuse of power, which has a lot of attraction for me as well. So yeah, it's a very powerful instrument of democracy, including of democracy checking itself against its own excesses.
These pictures produced shockwaves across Canada in 1994. Male guards stripping and locking down inmates at the prison for women in Kingston. Judge Arbour was appointed to head an inquiry.
There was a great deal of distrust, I think, amongst all sides as to how the process was going to unfold, who would be affected, what would happen to people's careers in the case of those at the Correctional Service, what would happen to the inmates' futures in the case of the inmates.
That's right.
Arbour has come back to visit the prison.
Joey. Hi.
Joey, hello, how are you?
Good.
It's really good to see you again.
Good to see you.
You look great.
Thank you. You look great too.
3 years, huh?
Yes, 3 years.
Yeah.
3 years. And then in September, see, we picked our own colors.
Don't worry about the mess.
The Arbour inquiry was unusual. Much of the work took place inside the prison walls.
Like we're here, we're going to be here for a while. Like there's the 2 private family visiting units over there. Yeah. And
we did also, apart from the formal hearings, we did these round tables, which I think were very successful, on issues, on Aboriginal issues, mental health issues, security issues, union staff issues. And this was very interesting, much more informal, just sitting around with academics and practitioners in these various environments.
Arbour's report skewered the prison system, but more than anything, it opened up the world behind the walls.
She said to me once that as a judge, you frequently have to find that people have done things that are wrong, and she did as a commissioner as well. But that doesn't mean you have to and you shouldn't deprive them of their dignity. And I think that was the way she conducted the inquiry. That was the result of the inquiry. And in the result, I think everybody who was involved in the Correctional Service and the public had a much clearer idea of some of the systemic failings and perhaps how they could be cured.
As Arbour wrote her prison report, her reputation was attracting attention far away. Her life was about to take another sudden turn. Louise Arbour was winding up her inquiry at the prison for women when she got a call from the United Nations. They were looking for a new chief prosecutor for the International War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague, and Arbour was a multilingual woman, a criminal law specialist who made things happen.
Frankly, what interested me right at the beginning was the criminal law aspect. I thought this was, well, certainly in my lifetime, I'd never seen an international use of criminal law of this magnitude. It seemed quite extraordinary.
The family, it seemed, was ready for another big change.
I didn't know where the Netherlands was, but I knew that it was far, and I thought that it would be really neat.
I think everyone sort of saw it as an adventure. Everyone was really excited. We were really, well, I was particularly excited to be, to have The Hague to go home to. It was pretty exciting.
When she left Toronto, she had the 3 kids, the dog, the cat, the husband, the friends, the circle of friends, and then going to Europe, and her life is changing completely now again.
Horrific crimes against civilians in Yugoslavia and then Rwanda had forced the UN to set up the tribunal. Arbour's job was to bring to justice some of the most notorious figures in the world, leaders connected to mass murder, rape, torture, and pillage.
This was very overwhelming, just to try to catch up with the amount of expertise that there was in the 2 tribunals. I remember, in fact, walking into my office and looking at this map, this big map, essentially, of the central part of the former Yugoslavia, thinking I'll never master the geography, never mind anything else. I mean, it just seemed such an overwhelming case, and it's very complicated, all the various military operations and so on.
But the tribunal was bureaucratic and slow. It had no power of arrest. It had little credibility.
It was very clear the minute I arrived what the problems were and what had to be addressed. Essentially, in the tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, it was arrest. I mean, there was only one issue. It was massive: arrest and resources. We had to get money, proper financial backing, and we had to get these accused arrested.
In Yugoslavia, the UN military objected that trying to arrest people would lead to more shooting and death.
And I basically told them I thought it was astonishing that they would have any reluctance in enforcing the body of law that we were trying to enforce, which at the end of the day is the only body of law that distinguishes a soldier in action from a common murderer. Louise Arbour, pleasure to meet you. This is my interpreter. For the day.
The prosecutor's life is tremendously demanding. You can hardly imagine what it's like to have the responsibility for both Yugoslavia and Rwanda. It's also very important to be able to assimilate very quickly a lot of information. So 1 minute the question is about a mass grave in Kosovo, the next minute it's about an appeal in Rwanda. So stamina is one of the essential qualities.
Oui, ça me fait plaisir.
Secrétaire général au ministère de la Justice.
Hey, Jessie.
Arbour has been coming to Rwanda at least 10 times a year.
Ça va aller. On va avoir une bonne visite cette fois-ci.
Her first visit was 2 years after the genocide. Rwanda was in agony.
Je m'en souviens très bien que je suis allée avec M. Rwagasore, qui était à l'époque le procureur général. Je suis allée avec lui puis une délégation à Gikongoro, visiter un site de massacre. Ça avait été une expérience marquante, très traumatisante, là, dans une certaine mesure. je passais d'une impression sur le terrain à des réunions de nature plus politique avec les dirigeants du gouvernement dans un environnement qui était hostile, je pense, on peut dire.
The United Nations as an institution had been thoroughly discredited by its performance during the genocide. And the tribunal was, of course, regarded as an extension of the United Nations. So that when its first representatives began to try to work there, they encountered very sharp hostility.
The Rwandans themselves had ended the genocide. Now they wanted to judge the guilty. The new government held 120,000 people, some guilty, others not. There was no system in place to judge them, but they did not want the UN to meddle.
It got a lot worse. The first visit was the meetings were very guarded, very critical of the tribunal generally, but not imminently or intensely hostile towards me.
But it got worse.
Then the hostility became very focused, and it was, in fact, every visit that I made here was more and more hostile.
Arbour was barricaded in her hotel room, alone, scared, angry.
It was hard for me to take it because, in a sense, I agreed to a large extent. I certainly understood their frustration, and I agreed to a large extent. I thought it was very unfair that they picked on me, though.
She could agree because the Rwanda tribunal was in no better shape than the one for Yugoslavia.
I found a state of affair in the tribunal that I thought was very discouraging. It didn't seem focused. It was extremely, I thought, badly administered.
With the Motorola radios.
The masterminds behind the genocide had fled Rwanda. They mocked the tribunal. Arbour had no time to lose. She gathered her team for a strategy session.
Her essential contribution was to realize the enormity of what happened in the society, and then to be, I think, to be conscious, to be involved, personally look at this disaster and say, look, I have to do something about it.
Mais on savait qu'il y avait eu, je sais pas, 5, 6, 700, 800 000 personnes de tuées. Et mais je me disais, mais on va jamais refaire surface. On va se disperser sur le territoire, alors qu'il y avait quand même de la documentation importante qui suggérait qu'il y avait eu un complot, qu'il y avait quelque chose qui était organisé.
She focused the investigation, made a list of key leaders, and launched a manhunt. It's taken 3 years to reassemble the genocide conspiracy. Some 30 of its leaders are in a UN jail. Arbour wants more.
And this is a person who's indicted who we cannot manage to arrest, and in Milosevic, the court agreed that we can have a temporary freeze order to prevent people using their money to avoid arrest. We have the same rationale here, and that would put a little shiver in the community if we start activating this here.
Then it's very hard to find people.
The grand catch of Arbour's campaign is the former prime minister, arrested in Kenya. Jean Kambanda had been at the center of the conspiracy. He had mobilized Rwandans for slaughter. But in 1998, he faced the UN judges. He pleaded guilty to charges of genocide. In return, his family was given a safe haven. He was given a life sentence, the maximum at the UN tribunal.
La personne qui était à la tête du gouvernement intérimaire avoue sa culpabilité et admettre sa participation dans le génocide de plus d'1 million de ses concitoyens. C'est remarquable. C'est un précédent juridique, à mon avis, qui peut-être met dans l'ombre tout le reste de ce qu'on a fait dans les 2 tribunaux.
Chef d'accusation 1, génocide. Chef d'accusation 2, entente en vue de commettre le génocide.
This is Arbour's last visit to Rwanda. During her travels, she's been appointed to the Supreme Court of Canada. But there's unfinished business. In Rwanda, revenge remains stronger than justice. The rebel army that ended the genocide rules with a vengeance.
Under the guise of being the ultimate victims of genocide, people who deserved, who demanded the sympathy of the world because the world had deserted them, they then had the right, perhaps, to do what they judged necessary for their protection, as they called it, even up to the point of killing large numbers of people.
10,000 dead, perhaps 50,000. New crimes by a new government. But once again, the outside world turned its back.
And the tribunal came along and more or less gave its added imprimatur, its added seal of approval to this by postponing the exposure of any possible crimes until some later date.
Arbour's tribunal depends on the goodwill of the new regime. But she fears that the moment she starts investigating that new regime, they'll shut down her tribunal, or worse. The situation makes her very uncomfortable.
C'est pas réaliste dans les circonstances actuelles de... On n'a pas la capacité, là, et par ça je veux dire, ni les ressources, ni l'environnement qui nous permettent de mener en même temps ces deux genres d'enquête. C'est carrément pas réaliste de le faire de façon très approfondie dans le moment. En tout cas, en parallèle avec l'effort monumental qu'on doit faire pour intégrer l'enquête sur le génocide comme tel. Mais c'est une enquête qui doit être faite, qui a des bases, à mon avis, qui sont suffisamment crédibles pour exiger que ce dossier-là soit développé.
Tu sais, c'est sur Chine, puis ça tourne, ça pivote à 360 degrés.
André Arbour has different passions than his sister. He escapes his Toronto business to create his little paradise north of Montreal. Once he was the traveler, she the homebody.
Elle m'a toujours dépanné, même je me souviens d'être parti en voyage. Bon, là, je me retrouvais à Lima ou à New Delhi. Puis là, j'appelais ma sœur. Ma sœur m'envoyait un peu d'argent, puis elle m'envoyait toujours un petit peu plus de ce que j'avais besoin, ce qui me permettait de passer l'hiver confortable. Puis, bon, on a toujours eu une complicité à ce niveau-là.
Ça va être le garage. Ça va être le garage où il y a le tas de...
When Arbour moved to The Hague, she needed a hand.
I thought I was going to be there for 2-3 months. But, you know, after a while, well, I found out that she needed me, and she found it out to herself, too. I don't think she expected it that much.
I had never lived with my grandmother before. And as a result of her being there for the 3 years, I'm much closer to her.
Arbour's job was exciting, but her personal life suffered. She and Taman separated after 27 years. Arbour worked her way through the crisis.
Je l'admire beaucoup parce qu'elle a beaucoup de courage et puis elle est persistante et puis on dirait qu'elle se laisse pas abaisser, elle se laisse pas écraser.
As you know, we had our investigators...
Premièrement, c'est une travaillante, hein? Le matin, elle est 6 heures debout, puis elle commence, puis les nouvelles, et puis ça marche comme ça tout le temps. Hein? Alors, c'est un travail, hein? Elle retient peut-être un peu de moi, là, je suis pas mal têtue. Moi, je suis comme ça, quand je commence quelque chose, je le finis.
Okay, now we have to finish working on this press statement, and then the press.
Ça n'a pas toujours été facile. Mais seule, hein, une femme, là, c'était assez difficile.
I just want to go home. I'm sick, I have a cold, I'm really tired. Before making a decision as to whether charges are appropriate, which charges and against whom, and I'm not finished. I want to do this press conference. I know what I want to say. I have to get it done. Now, should it not be forthcoming? The only thing that's going to my mind is, can I please go home, go to bed?
Kako ono ima niz mogućnosti od usmenog ukora do nametanja sankcija.
Her nomination to the Supreme Court caught Arbour in a dilemma. Her battles at the tribunal were just beginning to pay off.
She knew that she wanted to take it, but she also knew that there were a lot of people who didn't want her to leave the job that she had.
I'm really thrilled and excited that she's coming back to Canada. 3 years is a long time to be keeping the kinds of hours and the type of pace and stress of work that she has been. And even though I think she's done such a great job at sort of taking the abuse on her body, I mean, just the amount that she travels.
Just having a home that you can come back to and that's always there, and not having to leave it for another country every other day.
Sarajevo. On Sniper's Alley, traffic is the new danger. It's Arbour's last trip as war crimes prosecutor. She has a special mission. The Bosnian mountains cradle the small town of Srebrenica. In 1995, as the war raged, the Serb army captured the town. They separated the Muslim men from the women and children. Three days later, 7,200 men were dead, shot, decapitated, crushed with stones. It was the worst bloodbath of the war. The War Crimes Tribunal issued indictments, but it was impotent to do more, until March of 1998, when UN troops finally captured one of the Srebrenica commanders. Radislav Krstić faces charges of crimes against humanity. His trial will be the biggest ever in The Hague. Before she leaves her job, Arbour wants to make sure that the full story of what happened in Srebrenica will emerge. At an abandoned garbage dump, 250 bodies.
There is a huge story that comes out of the ground. When a site like this one is open, not only will we uncover, for instance, the number of bodies and their gender and their background and so on, but there's huge amount of information that is revealed by this extremely meticulous, essentially archaeological work.
What happened at Srebrenica may go largely unpunished. Arbour is determined it will not go untold.
My name is General Lieutenant Colonel Radislav Krstić. I am the commander of the 5th Corps.
By calling to account those who had every reason to believe they would never be brought to account, win or lose, in that kind of conflict, because they were untouchable. They were at a level of responsibility that guaranteed essentially their impunity. Military leaders, political leaders. And I think that that's what this trial and other trials that are taking place in The Hague are contributing to doing, is this shift, this crack in the guarantee of impunity of the mighty.
In more ways than are apparent, this is for me a returning home. I have spent the last
Ottawa in October. Her mind may still be in the war zone, but Louise Arbour knows she belongs here.
When I was a law clerk to Mr. Justice Pigeon, I was 24 years old. When I was 24, I never thought I would ever be 50.
It was a very powerful experience, I think, to be sitting in the audience and seeing all the 9 Supreme Court judges. I could see that she was happy, and I could see that she was proud of herself.
Although my 3 law clerks who are sitting here will no doubt be shocked to hear this, I sincerely believe that I can make better decisions today than I thought I could 27 years ago.
The great thing about Madam Justice Arbour is she has no ego. Always a big feature, and with her, it's transparent, it's obvious. Even at the swearing in, you could see that she's got a nice irreverence to her, and she's extremely approachable, gets along well with everybody she meets, and that's a really good aspect of her background, which I think will help her enormously.
Oh, I know what this is. Yeah, this is the one we're going to keep up here that goes with the black legs, and then we'll see if it fits. Regarde, maman, viens voir, on l'a, tu vas voir, ça va jamais rentrer ici. On l'a, il s'en vient avec la vitre. Oui? Non, 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 on n'est pas découragé. Hein?
Non.
Moi, je suis pas découragée.
Non plus.
New job, new city, new life. Louise Arbour delights in exploring the unknown.
I've made some very dramatic cuts from an environment in which I was secure. Immediately after I was called to the Quebec bar, for instance, I moved to another province. When I look back on it, I obviously like an environment in which I don't feel I know how all the parts work. I like that sense of essentially figuring out the new environment. It's like traveling. I like being somewhere that I don't know, where I don't understand everything that's said, and just trying to learn it and understand it, I like.